The first fragments that slipped through the static were almost meaningless. Broken syllables, faint metal groans, and a human breath too slow to belong to anyone still fighting. Analysts pieced them together in silence, eyes fixed on a screen glowing dim in the operations vault. There was no debate about who it was. The biometric markers confirmed Sergeant Elias Rowe, reconnaissance specialist, missing for 31 standard days. The channel was alien, encrypted in patterns no human system should have been able to catch, which meant the enemy hadn't intended for anyone on Earth to hear him at all. Elias's voice was strained, the cadence uneven, like someone speaking through clenched teeth to stop them from chattering. The feed carried no image, only sound and faint vibrations. Those vibrations told the real story: steel walls, long corridors, and machinery running with alien precision. And beneath it all, the background hum of a ship built for war. The captors were Zerath Command, whose methods were studied in military academies only to prepare soldiers for the worst possible outcome. They didn't interrogate with questions, they interrogated with conditions. Hours spent in soundless darkness. Sudden bursts of alien light that carried patterns meant to disorient. Gravity fluctuations that forced muscles into exhaustion without lifting a finger. The purpose wasn't to get information. The purpose was to demonstrate that human endurance was an anomaly, and anomalies were dangerous. Elias had been taken on the fringe of the Persis corridor after a small skirmish. His reconnaissance vessel was overrun, his crew scattered into escape pods. He had stayed behind to hold the ship's central systems long enough for the pods to vanish from Zerath's scanners. When they finally dragged him aboard their dreadnought, his helmet visor was shattered, one side of his face laced with shrapnel cuts, eyes half closed but aware. The aliens would see that awareness as defiance. That was enough to condemn him. The logs, what little survived, recorded hours of silence from him. No matter what they changed in his environment, he remained still, conserving breath, rationing movement. When they projected false landscapes into his cell, blindingly familiar scenes rendered in alien color spectrums, he kept his gaze on the floor. When they filled the air with distorted versions of human speech, bent into tones that scraped at the nerves, he closed his eyes. On the 24th day, a new voice entered the recording. It was Zerath, layered and resonant, speaking through a translator mesh. They outlined their belief that humans were an evolutionary accident, a species whose stubbornness outweighed its survival sense, a flaw they intended to correct. Elias coughed once, the sound rasping through the channel, and answered with something too low to be caught by the first pass of analysis. The Zerath voice paused. Their translators lagged. When the machine caught up, the alien replied in a clipped tone, lower than before, as if something in Elias's words had unsettled them. That was the last clear moment before the feed cut. What followed was a stretch of pure static, sharp enough to pierce the ears, then nothing. The analysts leaned back from the console, trading no words. They didn't need to. Each had heard the subtle shift in the alien voice, the moment when the interrogator became unsure. Officially, the military marked Elias as presumed dead. Unofficially, the fragment was sealed in a classified vault, labeled with a timestamp and no other identifiers. For those who had heard it, the sound of that breath, the weight behind those last words, lodged itself deep. They knew he hadn't broken. They knew the Zerath had taken more from that encounter than they'd given. Somewhere in the cold geometry of that alien dreadnought, a human had looked his captor in the eye and said something that changed the temperature of the room. The words were still buried in encrypted noise, waiting to be uncovered, but one fact was already certain: Elias Rowe had not left them unchanged. The first indication reached Earth's Strategic Command as a data anomaly in the outer solar monitoring network, a spike in encrypted alien traffic that did not match any known patrol cycle. The packets were traced to a transmission relayed from deep within the Persis corridor, buried under multiple layers of Zerath Command encryption. Decoding was slow, but the few recovered seconds were enough. A human voice, weak but intact, cut through the distortion. The identity was unmistakable. Sergeant Elias Rowe, previously listed missing in action, had been in Zerath custody all along. The information never entered public channels. A closed session was called within hours, pulling in representatives from the Defense Directorate, the Black Division, and the Orbital Intelligence Group. The meeting took place in a sealed facility in geostationary orbit, far from any possibility of passive interception. The recovered audio played once in the room. No commentary followed. The details of the Zerath's treatment methods, cross-referenced from past encounters, were understood without explanation. Official diplomatic avenues were discussed briefly and dismissed. Any public retaliation risked drawing the Zerath into open conflict, a war Earth's alliances were not yet ready to sustain. The focus shifted to covert options. Denial of capability would be essential, meaning no recognizable military assets, no traceable signatures, and no public acknowledgement of the event. It was during this stage that a name resurfaced in the conversation, spoken quietly by one of the senior intelligence officers: Ghost Program. Official records listed it as deactivated 2 decades earlier. No funding lines, no personnel rosters, nothing that would stand up under audit. Yet the program had not truly disappeared. It had simply gone deeper, existing in the gaps between agencies, assembled from individuals with no formal connection to each other on paper. Operatives who could move without flags, without ident tags, without history. Their purpose was never to win battles in the conventional sense, but to alter the equation entirely, operating where the idea of their existence was more valuable than proof. When the ghosts acted, they left no wreckage that could be tied to them, only doubt and the lingering question of what might come next. The director authorized reactivation without a vote. Orders were drawn up, encrypted beyond the reach of even Allied systems. The mission parameters were concise. Location: Zerath Dreadnought identified from the signal source. Objective: neutralize the perceived invulnerability of Zerath Command through a demonstration that would be undeniable to them and invisible to everyone else. The primary goal was not rescue. Elias Rowe was listed as non-recoverable based on operational risk, but to return a message in kind. The nature of that message was not recorded in any briefing material. It would be decided in the field by those carrying it out. From there, the operation moved into a compartmentalized chain. Only a handful of individuals on Earth would be aware it was underway. Equipment requisitions passed under the guise of maintenance shipments to an abandoned lunar construction site. Communications would be cut from the moment of departure. No signals would return until the ghosts either succeeded or were gone entirely. As final preparations were approved, the recovered fragment from Elias was run through deeper analysis. The words he spoke to the Zerath interrogator remained buried under noise, but the vocal tone was isolated. Despite the physical toll, there was no sign of capitulation. If anything, there was a measured defiance. Analysts concluded that whatever he had said was delivered with intent, not desperation. That conclusion carried weight in the room, though no one voiced what they were thinking. The Zerath had already felt the first edge of the message that was about to be sharpened. Within hours, the sealed orders left the orbital facility in the hands of couriers who would never meet each other, each carrying only a piece of the plan. The Ghost program was in motion again, and this time, the operation would have no name at all. The vessel used for insertion was built without registry or design lineage, its structure a blend of obsolete cargo hauler lines and components stripped from derelicts beyond charted trade lanes. It traveled without transponder, without light, hidden in the blind spots between known patrol vectors. No broadcast preceded it, no signature marked its approach. Inside, the Ghost unit operated without spoken coordination, every movement refined by muscle memory and training not found in any official syllabus. Penetration of the Dreadnought's outer perimeter relied on exploiting neglected redundancies. Zerath engineering favored centralization, an advantage in efficiency but a vulnerability when small systems went unmonitored. A heat-dampened approach threaded the gap between sensor arrays, the ship's hull scraping against the target's magnetic envelope without triggering alerts. Hull contact points were established, and the Ghosts shifted from transit to intrusion. Access was forced not through brute force but by manipulating a maintenance drone on the exterior hull. A manual override was installed using nothing more than a salvaged interface probe and a stripped conductive filament. The altered drone registered itself as damaged and requested internal repair. The automated intake granted entry, shuttling the disguised payload into the dreadnought's service spine. Within that network of narrow conduits, environmental readings fluctuated between tolerable and hostile. The ghosts adapted with minimal motion, adjusting systems on the fly to mimic ambient emissions. Internal navigation was guided by an evolving map assembled from intercepted maintenance data, each segment pieced together as they advanced. The Cinder code package remained sealed until they reached a primary control relay feeding into the ship's life support oversight. It was a construct not designed to destroy but to erode, altering oxygen levels, shifting temperature gradients, and introducing irregularities in environmental stability. The changes would be imperceptible at first, building over time into a psychological assault without leaving physical evidence of tampering. Progress was interrupted by the unexpected presence of a sealed chamber in a section marked as uninhabitable. The team confirmed life readings within, human in origin. Breach was initiated without hesitation. Inside, Elias Rowe was found restrained, body weakened but eyes alert. The restraints were cut, nutrient injections administered, and basic stabilizers applied. He was coherent enough to speak, voice reduced to a whisper. His words confirmed what none in the unit had assumed: he had not been held for interrogation in the conventional sense. The Zayrath had been studying him, not for tactical knowledge, but to measure the thresholds of human fear. His statement altered operational priority. Extraction parameters were rewritten on site. The mission would no longer end with the code's delivery. It would now include removal of both Elias and a Zayrath command figure. Identification was made via biometric scan of nearby secure compartments. The chosen target was the same officer responsible for Elias's captivity. The ghosts moved without hesitation, neutralizing automated defenses with short-range electromagnetic bursts and precise manual overrides. The officer was sedated, secured, and prepped for transport without raising a ship-wide alarm. With both objectives secured, exfiltration reversed the path of entry. The altered maintenance drone carried the package to its insertion point, ensuring the Cinder code was in place. The black vessel detached under the cover of routine system recalibration inside the dreadnought's own maintenance cycles. No alert was raised, no pursuit initiated. By the time Zayrath crew returned to standard operations, the intruders had already crossed beyond the detection threshold, carrying with them the living proof of human endurance and the embodiment of its reply. Elias was transferred to an undisclosed medical facility where no records were kept, monitored by personnel whose names would never be logged. His body bore the marks of prolonged deprivation, but his mind remained focused. Treatment was constant, minimal conversation maintained to prevent strain, and every visitor understood the unspoken boundary. Nothing about what came next would be discussed in his presence. The Zayrath officer awoke in total darkness. The atmosphere carried a faint metallic tang, oxygen content altered just enough to keep his system off balance. Temperature shifts came without rhythm, heat pressing against his skin 1 hour, a bone-deep chill settling in the next. There was no sense of time, light never returned. Sounds appeared and vanished without pattern, water dripping somewhere distant, the slow pacing of footsteps, the muffled hum of air cycling. The cadence was human, deliberate, unbroken by speech. Meals arrived at irregular intervals, placed within reach but without interaction. Sometimes days passed with nothing. Other times, food would be present when he awoke, though he could never recall hearing it placed there. Sleep brought no respite. He would wake to new scents, oil, ozone, faint traces of human breath, suggesting presence without proof. When he called out, the only reply was silence thick enough to press in from all sides. The officer's physiology was resilient to direct pain, but the conditions bypassed physical endurance. His own senses began to betray him. Without visual reference, the mind searched for patterns that did not exist. His memory replayed the final moments aboard the dreadnought, the human prisoner's gaze, the unbroken stillness, the words he had failed to fully translate. Each recollection deepened the unease. Time fractured. Hunger became secondary to the dread of what might follow. He began to anticipate footsteps, then dread when they did not come. The uncertainty became the weapon. No strike was made, no threat spoken, yet the mind eroded all the same. In the officer's culture, fear was considered a flaw, an error in genetic refinement. For humans, it was something else entirely, and here it was being applied with precision. After an unmeasurable stretch, the darkness broke, not with light, but with the sound of breathing directly in front of him. Steady, controlled, undeniably human. He spoke, demanding identity, demanding purpose. The breathing did not change. It continued until his own voice faltered. Then silence returned. When the light finally came, it was not to reveal a captor, but the interior of a shuttle docking bay. The officer stood alone, unbound, the environment sterile and devoid of human presence. A hatch opened to the void, and beyond it, his own vessel waited under escort. He walked aboard without resistance, every step heavy with the memory of where he had been. Upon his return, the Zerath Medical Corps confirmed no physical harm had been inflicted. No foreign devices were found, no trace of chemical interference. Yet his behavior altered in ways that could not be explained by injury. Direct eye contact became rare. His voice carried hesitation where none had existed. Command notices recorded an abrupt shift in protocol. Human prisoners were to be avoided, engagements near human borders reduced wherever possible. The event was never mentioned in any official exchange between the two powers. The Ghost program's involvement left no visible signature, and the operation did not exist on any ledger. But in the unspoken channels of command across the galaxy, the effect spread. The Zerath had met something they could not quantify, an enemy that fought without weapons and left marks deeper than wounds. What had been returned to them was not a prisoner, it was a message, delivered in silence and impossible to forget. Elias's official record closed with the notation, "Killed in action, remains unrecovered." No details were attached, no ceremony arranged. His name did not appear on any public memorial, and his service file was sealed beyond classified clearance. The operation that had brought him back was not documented in military archives. To anyone without direct knowledge, he no longer existed. Among those who had been present, the understanding was mutual: what had been done could never be traced, and what had been achieved could never be acknowledged. The Ghost program dissolved back into absence, its operatives dispersing without farewell or contact. No after-action reports were written. The ship that carried them left no wreckage, no signature, no proof it had ever flown. In the months that followed, subtle changes appeared in galactic movement charts. Zerath patrol routes shifted away from human territories, and their forward operating bases near the Persis corridor were quietly scaled back. Encounters that had previously ended in forced boarding now concluded with abrupt withdrawal. Merchant vessels reported Zerath warships shadowing them at a distance, never closing, never hailing. Rumors began to circulate among alien crews, carrying the shape of a story but no verifiable origin. They spoke of a human force that moved without leaving traces, one that could reach the heart of a ship without alarms, that could take and return someone without a mark yet leave them unwilling to face a human again. The descriptions varied, but one element was constant: no one claimed to have seen these humans directly. They were said to be present only in the periphery, like movement caught in the corner of vision, impossible to confirm until it was too late. Inside the small, shielded facility where Elias now lived, recovery was steady but deliberate. He walked the perimeter of his assigned space each day, not for exercise, but for familiarity. His body had regained strength, but it was his mind that held the sharper edge. Those who monitored him noted the way he weighed every word before speaking, the way his gaze stayed fixed when answering a question. When asked, in a rare unrecorded conversation, what the Zerath had wanted from him, he answered without hesitation. They had tried to measure fear, to define it as a flaw they could exploit. They had not understood that fear could be used, not avoided. "It's a teacher," he said, "and they don't know how to learn from it." The statement was left unchallenged, written down only in the private memory of those who heard it. The influence of that single exchange extended beyond him. In strategic assessments, planners noted the altered balance along human borders. No new treaties had been signed, yet the threat had diminished. The absence of hostility was not the result of agreement, but of uncertainty. The Zerath had been shown that their control was not absolute, and that the cost of testing humans again could not be predicted. In time, the event would fade from even restricted discussion. Those who had been directly involved would move on to other duties, carrying the knowledge without reference. The Ghost program would remain a possibility in the minds of those who feared it, sustained by the absence of proof and the persistence of rumor. Somewhere deep within an unmarked archive, a single unnumbered folder was returned to its place. The lock engaged, the drawer slid shut, and no one who opened it afterward could find what had been placed there. The record was gone, but the effect remained, echoing silently through the uncharted spaces between stars. The Zerath would not come close again, not because they could not, but because they no longer wished to.